Thank
Delightful.
you.
So for those of you who signed up for this, especially because you know Only Human and are like, who is Speak About It? What do they do? Speak About It is a consent organization. It's a sexual assault prevention organization. Most of our work that we do is in high schools and colleges. So we work with students to have discussions and facilitate discussions around sexuality, identity, relationships, hookups, party culture, all in the name of kind of helping young people establish really great boundaries, know what consent looks like for themselves and within their communities, and be able to kind of practice those skills with one another. We also have the super fun bonus of being able to do these kind of community facilitations and discussions as well. This is actually my first Speak About It community discussion that's not at a school, so I'm really, really excited to be here. And yeah, that's what I got about us. This program that you're here for today is Cyber Sex Ed Flirting Edition. So this is going to run about 45 minutes total in length, and we'll have a little bit of time for kind of questions and answers at the end. Jimmy, did I miss anything? Are we good to go on?
No, not at all. We can go on. But before we do, I just realized the smoothie that I'm drinking, the straw literally says flirt on it. I did not buy this for this. I've had this for 6 years. It just works really well. But to keep on going on, we like to use some ground rules in these conversations to make sure that everything stays on track and everybody feels as though it's a safe space where they can ask questions, voice opinions, anything like that. So the first rule that we use is don't yuck a yum. The essence of this one is basically if somebody likes something and it's not hurting anybody else, there's no need to make them feel bad for liking that thing if you don't. And the second part of that is assuming best intentions. We are all the masters of our own experience, and most people don't typically say things to hurt other people sometimes, but most of the time, that's not the intention behind it. So assume best intentions, because I'm sure you would want somebody to do that for you as well. And the second part of that is challenge the idea, not the person. It's super important if somebody says something that you might disagree with or might hit your ear a little bit funny, not to make generalizations about that person's character, but rather to ask follow-up questions about that idea, or to challenge that idea. The next one we use is participate with a purpose, which is basically just make sure that every question you're asking or statement that you're making is keeping the conversation going, keeping it flowing, rather than derailing to talk about your flirt straw. You know what I mean? And just being as present as you can. So we don't expect you to have your video on. We don't want you to have your mic on unless you're actively speaking. But just being present and being a good digital neighbor, which is the next rule. So making sure your mic is off when other people are speaking, making sure you are paying attention, and also not speaking over people as well. And I think that pretty much covers it. So I'm gonna pass it back to you, Abby.
Yeah, sounds good. That being said, Jimmy and I are not planning on talking at you for the next 45 minutes. There will be interactive components to this webinar. Please, at any point, feel free to drop a question in the chat. You can either put it in there for everybody to see or drop it privately to either Jimmy or myself, and we can read that out into the space and address that question. Additionally, since we are in this lovely Zoom meeting, if you all are familiar with the raise hand function under the reactions button and would like to speak your question or comment into the space, you're more than welcome to do that as well. Following that, after the presentation, we'll be making sure to drop all of our social media information so you can continue to connect with Speak About It, as well as email contact for Jimmy and myself in case you were like, I have more questions about what was happening or what was going on. But yes, please participate in the chat. We love to hear from you. This is a collaborative learning experience, and Jimmy and I don't know everything there is to know about flirting. So we hope that you also could teach us something as well.
Yeah, and listening to us for a while can be fun, but you don't want to listen to only us this whole time. We want to hear other voices.
Correct.
And before we dive in, it's always super helpful to make sure that we're on the same page as far as the terms that we're using. So we're going to get into some definitions really quick. So I want to open the floor to people to either in the chat or raise the hand. Defining sex. Sounds like a super basic question, but different people have totally different understandings and meanings. So I'm just interested to see where we're working from so that we can figure out how to work toward where we're going. And we'll give this about 30 seconds, not too long.
I know we didn't start off with a softball question.
I know, diving right in. All right, I feel like that's been about 30 seconds, but so essentially, sex is an expression of intimacy intended to satisfy sexual desires between interested parties. And we feel it's important to add in between consenting interested parties because that's our thing, consent. And we define consent as all parties freely saying yes to what they want and no to what they don't want in a way that's enthusiastic, fully informed, fully engaged, and revocable by everybody involved. So basically, if you get consent once, it doesn't mean that it's a blank check and you get to you have permission to do that thing all the time. It's something that can be taken back in the middle if somebody changes their mind, because we're humans, we change our minds all the time. And we follow a yes means yes ideology. You probably all heard of the no means no way of talking about consent, but we feel the yes means yes is a little bit more inclusive to protect people in the fight, flight, or freeze responses, where no means no kind of covers the fight and flight, but only an enthusiastic yes, meaning yes, really kind of takes into account that freeze response if somebody might not feel safe to say the words no. And just a more positive tone overall, because talking how not to hurt somebody or get hurt can be really burdensome and really heavy after a while. So we want to remember why we're even talking about this, which is pleasure. That's what sex is about. It should be fun, and learning about consent and the proper ways to flirt is the best way to be good at sex. We have to remember the good aspects of intimacy in order to make sure that we are keeping everybody safe and everybody's having a pleasurable time. And if you are having sex, you are probably hoping that it will be a good time. And it can feel really scary to ask somebody about what you want once you have your pants off, but you should speak up to maximize your enjoyment. It might feel awkward, but if the goal of both parties involved is to have a good time, speaking up, it seems a lot more scary than it actually is. Think of it, we as Speak About It like to use food metaphors for pretty much everything. So we have one for this. We like to think about it like cake. Consent is like cake. And how, might you ask? Because you might really like cake, but you probably don't want to make an entire cake for your friend's birthday or something like that without knowing what their favorite flavor of cake is. Because it would feel really bad if you made them this whole cake and then they're like, oh, I'm actually allergic to all of the ingredients in there. And also, if they want cake at all, maybe they don't like cake, maybe they hate cake, maybe they want an ice cream cake. That would be me. And plus, if somebody says that they want cake, it doesn't necessarily mean they want the entire thing at the first go. Like, they're probably going to want to try a slice to make sure it tastes good first. And then if they go for the entire sheet of cake, more power to them.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Jimmy. We had a couple nice things be brought up in the chat as well that I just want to draw folks' attention to. When we asked for a definition of sex, we're talking about sex as an experience, as opposed to how it's sometimes used in relation to people discussing like gender and what gender identity is made up of, and if sex is a component of that and how it relates in that sphere as well. We're not going to dive as much into that in this webinar particularly, but it's a super good point, and that's exactly why we want to define our terms, because we could think that we're talking about one thing and really be going totally for something else. The same person also brought up in the chat, what about a maybe, but my body isn't feeling it now? Yeah, exactly. That is purposefully why we have reversible and enthusiastic as part of those definitions of consent. You can always be like, yes, I want to do this right now. And then in a little bit be like, actually, I'm not feeling it anymore. And cool, that might be for you where consent ends and where that interaction ends or takes a pause. So you always fully have the ability to be like, this is how my body is responding to this timeline. And so my consent is in connection with what my body is ready for and not ready for. And that timeline is unique to every single individual.
Well said.
Yeah, great. Shall we move to the next little slide? Cake was the last of yours, right, Jimmy?
Yep.
Cool. So we're going to start off with the scary elephant in the room when we're talking about flirting, and that is rejection.
Dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. So you tell us, what does rejection mean to you? What do you think of when you think of rejection? We'll give you another like 30 seconds, minute or so to write in the chat, or feel free again to raise your hand and come off mute. Ooh, we got someone not wanting me in the chat. Yeah, that's so specific. And I feel like especially when we talk in this arena, we tend to see rejection as something that is really personal and that is about you, which we'll talk about more as we keep going. We also have the fear that keeps me from stepping outside of my comfort zone, perceived failure, embarrassment, alone, getting turned down. Ooh, so many. When boundaries are tested, but when the boundaries or personal wants, needs weren't clarified in the first place. Rejection not being good enough. I see rejection as me intentionally putting an offer out and that offer being denied and being judged. Yeah, absolutely.
These are all great responses. Also, I'm impressed, but also want to make a note because a lot of people are messaging in the general chat, which is amazing. But if anybody has anything they want to share privately that they don't want like linked back to them, feel free to send us a private message or like keep on doing it in the general chat. I love that. But if you would feel more comfortable doing it in a private message, you have that option as well.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. Having a mindset of something that is going to happen, it goes in the complete opposite direction. Oh, we're going to talk so much about expectation a little bit later on. Yes. Have you all seen this lesson plan? Do you know what's happening? Right? Okay, great. Being unliked, being denied. Yeah. Having more sexual or lack of sexual needs than the other person. Yeah, a mismatch in desire potentially could feel like rejection. These are all awesome answers. Thank you so much for sharing them. I'm just gonna keep us moving along, but feel free to keep popping things in the chat as they come to you. So in flirting, in the realm of relational rejection, we do tend to have this kind of cultural narrative that is a rejection is a rejection of that entire person, when in reality, that's not necessarily what it's going to be. It's a rejection of whatever is being particularly offered in that exact moment in time. But there are a lot of reasons why we kind of jump and make that conclusion. Part of it is that we are biologically hardwired to want connection. So as a social species, I think, Aranda, you can go to the next slide now. I'm not sure. Yes.
Hey.
Hooray. So as it says here, loneliness and isolation are linked to shorter lifespans and a variety of different health conditions for humans. We also learn a lot from people that we're with, and sex and intimacy are some of the best ways to kind of socially connect and build those intimate connections really quickly. It just makes a lot of sense to us. So evolutionarily, we really want others to not reject us. We want them to accept us. We want all of these benefits. We want the health benefits. We want the social connection. And especially in sex, dating, and relationships, it can feel so, so vulnerable when that rejection does come. So as we move forward, we want to go ahead and talk about ways that we can lessen that fear of rejection. So now that we're like, yes, we understand being rejected can feel really scary, but what is actually happening in that interaction between one person and the other? So in non-sexual contexts, there are plenty of ways that we get rejected all the time and it doesn't bother us. Like, it doesn't hurt us. We don't internalize it. We don't think it's about ourselves. So as a question to the group, if you're walking down the street and you see a super cute dog and you really want to pet it, and you go up to the owner of that dog and you're like, hey, can I pet your dog? What are some reasons that that owner might be like, no, you can't pet my dog right now? They might bite you. Working service dog. Guide dog, anxious dog, violent dog. Yeah. The dog might be scared. I think about too, because whenever I'm walking anywhere, I'm always in a rush. Like, I'm never on the street just strolling. So the owner might like have somewhere to be, you know, you might have dirty hands. Sure.
I was gonna say the dog just went to the groomer and you don't want their hands touching them.
Yeah. Might not be used to it.
Mm.
Absolutely. So dog being something that is yours. Oh yeah, the dog might not be used to strangers. Yeah, absolutely. So we can kind of think of all of these different reasons that have nothing to do with you, that someone might be like, don't pet the dog, right? Oh yes, the COVIDs. Yeah, we're going to talk about that more as we get into
COVIDs.
This is a weird time for being close to strangers and sharing physical space with strangers. That is just true. So given that we can come up with all of these variety of reasons why someone might not want a particular interaction in a non-sexual context, let's move that over. Why might someone not want an intimate engagement with you or with anyone else? Might be tired, shy, or afraid, currently not ready to put that energy out there. Yeah.
Mm.
Body odor, sure. Past trauma. They might not know you well in that. Yeah, these are great answers.
Yeah.
Unsure of your intentions. I love that answer.
Mm.
I'm going to throw another one in. Dysmorphia around body parts. Yeah, our relationships with our bodies are so complicated. What about you just had a huge meal, like a giant burrito from Chipotle, and you're just exceptionally full and not feeling really sexy at that moment in time, right?
Or you're hangry.
Yeah.
Excellent point.
Or the bed's not made, or you're tired, right? There's a variety of reasons that people might turn down a sexual interaction, and a lot of them have literally nothing to do with the other person that they may or may not be rejecting, right? So it's just important as we continue to have these conversations more openly in our lives with people that we interact with, to remember that if we feel like we're being rejected, it's probably not about us. And also, speak about it catchphrase. You can just ask if you're not sure. You can always communicate. And yes, Aranda, I put this in the chat, but thank you so much for how much you're participating. We really appreciate it. All right, over to you, Jimmy.
Sweet. I also want to shout out the last couple that we got in the chat, because I think they're really great, like hangry, tired, or overstimulated. Because sometimes it doesn't have to be something tangible. If the person, also if you're not wearing cute underwear, exactly. There's so many different reasons that somebody might not want to, and they might not even want to explain to you. So you might not actually know the reason, and that's okay too. But before we dive into flirting, we've set the stage, but we haven't defined it the same way we've defined our other terms. So what is flirting? The dictionary says that it's behaving as though attracted to or trying to attract someone for amusement rather than with serious intentions. But we like to add in that it's both social and sexual behavior, and it can be used for sexual or romantic interest, or it can be just for fun. It can be written like in text or DMs, it can be spoken, or it can be physically displayed as well. There's some common actions that have also been coded as flirting in society and science. I think that's on the next slide. Yay! So there's a ton of different things, all the way from eye contact, open body language, making physical contact, to things such as like compliments or slight eyebrow raises, or if they're super responsive to when you post on social media as well. And flirting is super hard to detect, but people know when somebody's not flirting with them, but we're kind of bad at judging when someone is flirting with us. So if we're in a board meeting or something, we're not thinking that the person giving the presentation is flirting with us because they made eye contact with us and kept it, and they had an open body language. But it's coming into context, and context is super duper important. And sometimes these signs are just signs that somebody's a good listener or a good conversationalist or just want to be your friend. So it's super important to think about intent as well. Like, what's the intention behind the open body language or the slight eyebrow raise? And folks are really subtle sometimes because they don't want to put themselves out there and then be rejected by the other person. Or to misread the situation. If the person's just being nice and you thought it was flirting, you kind of want to avoid that. So people are way more subtle about it. And there is a difference between being flirty and flirting. Some of these traits are just qualities of people's personalities. Like, that's just who they are, and that's how they are with everybody. Or because flirting's like play. So some people just kind of enjoy the banter that is flirting. I think we all kind of enjoy having a good banter back and forth with somebody. I know I do. But it doesn't necessarily mean that I have any sexual intentions behind it. And to add on to that, society deems us flirty if we display these features, whether that's been our intention in the past or not. If we have these qualities, society deems people as flirty, especially if people are traditionally or conventionally attractive, and specifically for more feminine folks as well. And there's also the added layer of confirmation bias, which makes it hard to detect. Because when we want to be flirting with somebody, it's super easy to change our parameters for how we're viewing the situation. So if we want somebody to be flirting with us, if they like our Instagram story like 5 minutes after they post it, it's easier to perceive that as, oh, cool, they are into me, because that's the desired outcome that you have. Additionally, men are really good at reading positive and negative body language. And according to one Michigan researcher, they found that it's more likely for men to perceive any of these signs or positive body language as evidence of consent with someone that they're attracted to, or if they're getting intimate with somebody as well, having that be a sign of consent to move forward as well. And our own research showed us that there is an additional feature in flirting, which is that both parties have to enjoy it to be considered flirting. There's a major, major difference between hitting on somebody and flirting with somebody. Even the words themselves, like on versus with, one is mutual, one is back and forth, whereas we've all had a conversation where somebody's talking at us rather than with us, and we know how that feels. It's energy coming from one person, totally directed at the other person, the person taking it in and not giving it back. Whereas talking with somebody, it's a back and forth. It bounces off each other. It adds on. It's in the moment. And so
Jimmy,
that mutual, yeah.
I was gonna say, can I just pause you right there? We have
Please.
a couple different questions popping in. The first being, did you say that men are accurate in perceiving flirting, or just that they perceive lots of things as flirting?
I think men are aware of the body language, and often can they might have a misread on it, but they're very aware that of the body language itself or these expressions. Does that make sense?
And I feel
and
like,
do you want to add anything in?
Source, yeah. I was
Can I explain a little?
Go
As
ahead.
Like the resident boring sciencey person. And so, yeah, the study found that men were particularly good at being able to read positive and negative body language, right? To be able to say that, like, oh, this person seems to be like in a good mood or not in a good mood. But they were more likely to take any positive body language as meaning that it was consent, right? And meaning that these people were flirting with them. And so I think the confusion is that you did hear that men were good at something, but not the thing that they thought they were good at. Does that make sense as a distinction? Yeah. Here, let me see. Yep, yes. I can get the link to the study. One sec.
Okay. Thank you so much, Rondé.
Of course, yeah, no, I can keep talking.
Can keep going. As Jimmy was saying with regard to mutuality, when we were prepping for this presentation, so Jimmy, I hope it's okay if I share a small piece of personal information about you. Jimmy
okay.
and I,
yeah, that's fine.
That's fine. Jimmy and I are both Libras, who are traditionally regarded for astrology folks out there as the flirts of the zodiac. And I had a friend send me a little while ago, like an astrology meme about Libras that called Libras Schrodinger's flirt, where they only decide if they were flirting with you after they find out if you were into the interaction or not. And on one hand, I was like, oh, wow, like dragged. Okay. And on the other hand, that's actually a really good point. Like the interaction was flirting if it was mutual and if it was consensual. If it wasn't that, then it was something different. And it was a different kind of interaction. So just wanted to toss that in there too. Jimmy, are you good, or do you want me to move forward?
Yeah, you can completely move forward. The last note that I wanted to just add in is if there, it really just kind of comes down to this mutuality part of it. It's kind of just rests on what both people want and what the intention behind it is. So it's super important just to be aware of the different intentions that can be behind flirting before you start to perceive it as meaning something sexual.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, I would love to talk about some common reasons why people flirt. Thank you so much, Arande. So one of the first reasons, and one of the ones that may seem the most obvious, is that people are looking for some sort of sexual interaction with that particular individual. Flirting is tied to the limbic system in our brain, which is a system that helps us to regulate bodily functions. And one of those is arousal and wanting sex. People can also just flirt for fun. They might treat it like a sport. And when we say that, we talk about winning at flirting with a particular definition of success that we borrow from a Penn study. And that definition is how, after the interaction, favorably people looked on you as the flirter. So instead of thinking about successful flirting as like, oh, this is successful because now I get another date with that person, or now like they're going home with me, you can think about successful flirting as, does that person like me walking away from this interaction? Great. I see a question in the chat too. Callisto, I'm putting a pin in that, but I promise I see it. I'm going to come back to it. Yeah. So it could be a sport. People also flirt to explore what it would be like to be in a relationship or have more intimate interactions with that particular person. They can also relationally flirt to try to grow intimacy with a particular person. So some people flirt with their friends just because they want to get to know them better, or kind of grow that sense of intimacy moving between people. Another reason people flirt is to increase your own self-esteem. Like, it feels good when people laugh at your jokes. It feels good when people are making eye contact with you and are interested and engaged in what it is that you're saying and the interactions that you're having. And then one of the last reasons of flirting is instrumental flirting, which is flirting to try to get something from someone. This generally gets a little bit of a bad rap because it sounds kind of like manipulation, but it might not be in quite as heavy of a place as that. My example, are there any Gilmore Girls watchers out there? Yes, Bree has raised a hand. I see it. Yep.
Yes.
Lorelai Gilmore is like the queen of instrumental flirters, right? So like there's this interaction early on where you hear Lorelai Gilmore on the phone with like her towel guy. She runs a hotel. She needs towels. And she's talking really informally with the dude on the phone. She's like, oh, yes, you're the best. Like, I love you so much. Whatever. She just like is personable and she makes jokes and she is actively showing interest in those particular people, flirting with them to get what she wants to run her business. But that also has context, right? Like those people aren't walking away from that interaction thinking that Lorelai Gilmore is trying to get them in bed, right? She clearly was trying to get her towels for her hotel. So that's kind of instrumental flirting. I want to just pop back real quick, Jimmy, to Callisto's question.
Yes.
Okay. Going back to the rejection topic from earlier, what if a person stinks at or may not know how to flirt? So, I think we're going to kind of continue to get into this here, and feel free, Jimmy, to pop in if you want. But
for sure,
really is a set of behaviors that is demonstrated to grow connection and show interest in a particular person, which is why that context piece is so totally important, right? So it could be telling jokes with people. It could be those behaviors that Jimmy was showing earlier, like prolonged eye contact, responsiveness on social media. There's kind of that set of behaviors. But again, the really important thing is that all of those behaviors can exist also in other ways. So the context of being like, I think I'm interested in you, or whatever it might be, that you kind of set that stage, and how you set up that consent as a baseline and move forward, that'll also help people know that you're flirting, even if you think that you're bad at it. Because if you're genuinely interested in folks, a lot of that, our bodies just like show through for us.
Mm-hmm.
That help.
Yeah, and to tack onto that too, I think it depends on who you are and what your style is. Because there's some people, like we've all, wait, what? My video off?
Your video was off.
Is this
You're
still?
back. No, you're back.
That's so weird. I didn't turn it off. So if I disappear again, maybe. But I think it depends on the person. Like we've all been in elementary school and stuff like that and seen the kid that pulls somebody's hair and runs away. And that's meant to be flirting. So it really does depend on the person. So what might be comfortable for you might not be comfortable for somebody else. Like if you're not a person that the physical contact would doesn't feel comfortable for you, maybe that's not your flirting style. Maybe it's just good conversationalism. And also that intention that Abby was talking about, if your intent is to like engage in flirting with somebody, it's probably going to manifest in that eye contact and open body language, especially. And to move on to that, because it was so well articulated by Abby, all these different reasons that somebody might flirt, I'm here to make it complicated. So power dynamics. There's definitely a relationship between flirting and power. Like Abby said, you can use flirting to get something that you want from somebody with a certain power, like trying to get out of a parking ticket or getting a free drink at a bar. And there can also be flirting with somebody who has less power, like a boss flirting with an employee, for example, or like a celebrity flirting with one of their fans. There's obviously a power imbalance. And then there's flirting where it's just equal power, just two friends out at a bar, two people hanging out with no real power inequity. And these can also overlap, and that complicates things even more. So a boss who might genuinely have interest or genuinely have feelings for somebody on their staff, it is genuine, but there is still that power imbalance. So it's super important just to be aware of these things, because it can make certain things feel different. Different types of these flirting plays can feel a lot different than others. And it's also important just to be aware of this, just so we're not getting into situations where we don't know where it's going from there. So we still feel like we have a sense of understanding of the situation. And do you want me to take this out, sir?
Are we talking about expectations?
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, why don't you take it and I'll pop in
Sure.
for consent.
Yeah, absolutely. So flirting with expectation, it's super important to not flirt with expectations, considering the amount of reasons why somebody could be flirting. And since all of the actions associated around flirting are not necessarily exclusive to flirting. We talked about it before. Somebody could just be a good conversationalist. They might not code it as flirting as well. And it means that we have to know some way of if we are flirting or not, which is consent.
Thank you so much, Jimmy.
You're welcome.
So with consent and flirting, I'm hoping for also my folks, I'm seeing a lot of questions in the chat about concern about social skills, or if there are folks who are not necessarily neurotypical, who are also trying to flirt. Hopefully this will help. Again, at Speak About It, we are not fans of the kind of social gray area, right? Like we would much rather have you, instead of trying to read and understand what someone wants, just ask them directly, which hopefully will be a skill that is accessible and available to folks of all abilities as well. So consent for flirting. You need consent to flirt with someone. If you're not sure if you're flirting with someone or if they're enjoying the conversation, you can ask them. For someone that you're talking to in a bar, if it's someone that you don't know, that could be as simple as being like, hey, it seems like you're not really into this conversation. Would you prefer to go back with your friends? Right? Offering a little bit of an out. You can also kind of express, I'd really like to flirt with you or continue talking, like to keep chatting. any of those kind of things are a little bit more casual ways to kind of ask if you can continue to be engaged in that interaction with someone. Also, it's important to consider the context in which you are talking to people and trying to flirt with people. Again, work is a great example of a place where flirting is maybe going to be just a little bit more complicated. People are going to be focused on other things as opposed to being in a social situation. If you're meeting up with a group, hanging out with friends at dinner, those are all different situations in which it might be a little bit more expected that there would be some kind of more personal connections that are happening there. The other thing is, again, to notice the cues in other people's body language as you can. So if someone really isn't speaking up a lot in the conversation, if you were totally monopolizing the time, the airspace, and going through that, or if you're like seeing someone who's constantly checking around or like always on their phone, they might be a little bit less interested in the interaction. And so again, you can just kind of like not take it personally, say, hey, it seems like you might not be so into this right now, so I'm going to go back to my group or whatever it might be. Additionally, you can also kind of test the waters as you get into flirting. We really recommend starting with words first. So that might be giving someone a compliment, saying hello, speaking to them, as opposed to going for some of those more physical flirting actions, just because that gives you a sense of if you want that dynamic to be something that is continuing. Also, when you're giving compliments to people or starting with words, think about the types of compliments that you're giving, right? It's one thing to come up to someone and compliment them for something that they have no control over. That might be a particular identity they hold, like a racial identity or what their body type is, as opposed to something that someone has put effort into. Your outfit looks really great today. I love the way you did your makeup. Wow, that's an amazing tattoo, right? That's a little bit borderline, but you know that that's a choice that someone made. So you want to make sure that you're complimenting folks based on things that they have control over, things that they can put effort into. And also, like we said, be aware of the context. I mentioned that one already. The last thing, remember, you're a snack. People don't always want goldfish. They don't always want Twizzlers. They don't always want an apple and peanut butter. These are some of my favorite snacks, but they're not all the same, and I don't always want them, and I don't always want them at the same time. If someone is not interested in flirting with you for one moment in one interaction, that does not mean that you were not wholly delicious and that there won't be someone who is very, very excited to flirt with you at some point in the future. Remember, you're a snack. Yes, yes.
Absolutely.
Everyone is snacks. Great. Jimmy, your camera's off again. Do you want me to turn it back on?
What is happening here?
I don't know.
It's trying to make it doesn't turn off my mic when you're talking, it turns off my camera. That's just rude. I want to extend the food metaphor though. Somebody might have already eaten too much that day. They might be bloated. Somebody might be allergic to the ingredients, but that doesn't mean everybody is. You'll find the person who it's their favorite snack. But to shift a little bit, we talked about a lot of in-person interactions. I think it is also important in this technological digital age to talk about the intersection between flirting and technology, because social posturing still exists in the online world. We try to post our best content to show the best side of ourselves or us at our best. We might do something, or we might post stuff because we know who's going to see it and we're hoping that person sees it. This could be on our Instagram stories or Snapchat stories, posting thirst traps because we want specific people to see it or something like that. And there's also private and public banter. Sliding into DMs is very different than bantering with somebody on Facebook comments. Very different contexts in this public forum, and it's important to be aware of those. It is quite the time to be alive, I agree. But it's just important to understand those different contexts so that you have, if you are having expectations around them, you can adjust them accordingly. And sexting is also a major intersection between flirting and technology. It's important to note a lot of us are sexting, so we should just make sure that we're doing it responsibly. And we do have to note that the safest sex is not having sex. And if you are having sex, the safest sex is with yourself. But what if we are going to engage in sexting? What might be some pros? And by pros, I mean like of pros and cons, but just the pro part.
Can be long distance, no STIs.
Mm,
You can always end the conversation. Yeah, phone's off. Sorry, done.
yeah.
It can be a big confidence boost. Ooh, testing out fantasies.
Mm. You're in control of what you say and show. Yep.
I love that one.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Can help you miss someone and get in the space of wanting them when you're in person. Distance makes the heart grow fonder. Absolutely. If there's
Yeah.
more risk available, easier to be yourself and less anxious. The person might be impossible. In person might be impossible mentally. Yeah, absolutely. Especially like during these COVID-y times. Yeah, absolutely. So it can be super helpful to have that as an option. And if you wouldn't, oh wait, no, all of them are on that slide. Never mind. But the pros are, it can be really fun, which is the essence of all of this anyway, is having a good time. And having a physically safe way to explore and express sexuality, as we were just talking about. Maybe mental health wise, you just can't do the in-person thing, or I don't know, like with the certain coronavirus that we got going on, maybe you are autoimmune and you don't want to be in person because you're at a higher risk. There's many different reasons. It can also help to build and maintain intimacy when you cannot be around somebody. As you just mentioned, it does make the heart grow fonder, distance. And it can also be a really good confidence boost. It's always, it's really nice to get that validation sometimes. Whether it's just like a chatty flirt or pics or whatever, it feels really good to get the validation from somebody else when you need that confidence boost. And it can also demonstrate interest. If you're just getting to know somebody that you haven't had the chance to interact with or in person, it can be a really great way of showing that you are interested in having a certain type of relationship with them when you do get the chance to be in person with them. And now that we've talked about the pros, let's talk about some cons. What are some potential cons to sexting? Absolutely. Can't see their physical responses. Absolutely. You don't know if that person's sharing your message with their friends or if it's being used against you. It's really hard to read tone. Yeah, you can't get them back.
Accidentally saying duck is
Oh my
maybe
God.
favorite one so far.
Yeah, that's amazing. Judgment and sharing and laughing. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a risk that you might lose control of the images because you're passing them to somebody else. And regardless of the reason, if somebody's doing it for revenge or to show their friends and look super cool, or your friends and family might see it, like that's always a big con and a big fear for people. And it can also affect like gossip, jobs, and if you're on a team or something like that, and things for the future. It can have a lasting impact. So that's definitely a con for sure. They can screenshot. Yeah, absolutely.
Jimmy, can I add something about that?
Please.
In my super ideal world, the fact that you once in your personal life ever took or sent a nude or sexted someone will not be seen as a negative or a con in relation to your actual capability to do your job in a professional context. That's just my hope. I'm sharing it out in hopes that this will also be your hope and we can go make a better world for people who have and continue to sext and still are fantastic and professional and accomplished. That's what I feel about that.
Absolutely. Thank you. That was really important to note. Because yeah, there's a lot of like social stigma around it. I feel like women especially get the raw end of the deal on that. There is a lot of assumptions made. But that is a later conversation. We can dive into this after this part is over. When we have time for the Q&A, we can totally talk about that. It can also be harassment. If it's coerced or if it's unsolicited. It's basically the equivalent of flashing a stranger. If somebody sends you a dick pic and you're not expecting it, You might be in the car with your mom and she's controlling Spotify and that pops up and now your mom threw your phone out the window out of your moving car. It's also been shown to have a positive correlation with other risk-taking behaviors. It can help to reinforce harmful social tropes, as we were just talking about, with women being trophies or sexual objects, or on the reverse, if a woman is engaging in sexting, it can have a lot of social stigma around that as well. Whereas men are looked at as the collectors, or for acquiring these images, and it makes them cooler. It can also have legal implications as well if one, or in some states, both parties are underage. And photos of yourself can be child porn if you're a minor. And also the ability to small talk and share details sometimes seems grating, but it's also really important to have that in the face-to-face interactions. Having those, it might seem like a totally different world when you've gone from only exclusively sexting to talking to the person in person, because if you're only able to say the dirty stuff you want to over text, what happens when you're both standing in front of each other with no pants on? And I just want to pose something to the group as well. Do we think these change if you're in a relationship with a person, or if, yeah.
Yes. Cool.
Yeah, great.
I think the cons can change more than the pros. Some may, but still great to check in.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And it can also change too, from just because the level of trust is developed. So you see, you might see some of these cons as less likely to happen, or you might see the pros as like really good reasons to like want to continue that if that's something you're already interested in. It might help the pros outweigh the cons. But it also doesn't necessarily change that the cons still do exist, because we, as well as we know some people, like we'll never fully know anybody. So you might think the person's fantastic, you break up, and then they're on a revenge tour. So it is just important to make those notes as well. And I think it also depends on each individual relationship.
Yeah. Awesome. I know we're getting short on time, so I want to move around and we're going to get through as fast as we can our little tips and tricks for the end. Okay, here are some takeaways. You can ask early on when you're engaging with people, how do you feel about flirting with me? How do you feel about continuing this conversation? How do you feel about maybe sexting? Those are great questions. You can ask when it's the time. So again, like Jimmy said, if someone has said, yes, I love sexting, that does not mean that they love sexting when they're in the car with their mom, or when they're doing any other myriad of things in which it's just like not a good time. Follow the lead of the person that you're interacting with, both for in-person and for digital interactions. If someone is really just trying to get out of the conversation, you can get out of them. Similarly, if you text someone something like, what are you wearing? And they're like, my sweaty gym clothes. Okay, cool. They might not be so interested in having a sexy conversation with you at that particular moment in time. Also, please don't ever pressure anyone. If there is a mismatch and someone is interested in continuing an interaction in a certain way and someone isn't, it's not a real yes. It's not going to be true consent if they're feeling like they have to do it for whatever reason. And yes, intimacy, as it says, is a privilege and not a right. Don't be the person that screenshots the photos, right? Don't be the person that shows it to your friends. Someone trusted you with a really vulnerable part of themselves in sharing that with you, and that's a beautiful gift. We just hope that you treat that as such. It says here, bolded in my notes, don't be a dink, which is just like the TLDR of that as well. Just respect the intimacy and the trust that people share with you. Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't actually make you cooler to show your friends the sexual photos. It means that you kind of suck. But yeah, also somebody posted in the chat and I loved it. Yeah, even when you're in a relationship, you still don't want your mom to see the photos. Absolutely. I think we can all agree to that statement. But some takeaways or some tipaways. Remember the common signs that we talked about. Tip-aways. Remember those common signs that we talked about that are all listed on there. I'm not going to read them again because I already read them before, but just remember too the nuance of this could also just be somebody being a good conversationalist, wanting to be your friend, or just really being engaged in the conversation that you're having. So being aware of that intentionality portion is so important.
Second tip, please remember that flirting is this the right one? No, I think you're right. Yes. Be flexible with your expectations. Flirting is about building relationships. It's about that mutuality that we talked about. We want to make sure that everybody is having a good time in the interactions. Again, as I said, studies show that people who can kind of adjust their flirting to what's working for the other person tend to have the most success, which means that you leave a good impression on that other person after the interaction is finished. So as long as you're focused on the person you're flirting with and not just on you, you're likely to be responding to their needs as well.
Yeah. And on top of that, being open to flirting can manifest in like if you're like, I don't know how to flirt, being open to flirting or flirting with somebody will translate into body language a lot of the times. And also being aware of, if you want to engage in flirting, being aware of the context and the environment that you're in. So if you want to have a flirtatious relationship, maybe the board meeting isn't the place to look for it. But also being aware of, if you go to a bar or a club or something like that, it doesn't necessarily mean that you want to be flirted with, but being aware of that factor of that people are more likely to engage in flirting or think that you are being flirtatious. So it's just having that awareness around the context for yourself so you can protect yourself, and just make sure that you are not stretching your boundaries if you don't want to stretch your boundaries. Going to places where that is definitely a possibility, like a club setting. If you're more shy and introverted and want to spend one-on-one time with talking to somebody, there's no pressure at all there's no one size fits all approach to flirting or being good at flirting.
Yeah, absolutely. And last but not least, we want to remind you to test the waters. Start your flirting with your words as opposed to your actions. Thank you, Aronde. And be aware of the kinds of compliments you're giving people and the context in which you're delivering them. So that's our tips. Are we good? Just scrolling through. Delightful. That's all the content that we have. We are right up on 2 minutes till the end of this beautiful, lovely webinar. I'm going to start dropping in the chat contact information for Speak About It. Bree, I think you had some links you wanted to drop as well. And Jimmy, if you wouldn't mind just seeing if people have questions and taking those.
Yeah, absolutely. If anybody has any questions, feel free to shoot me a direct message, post in the chat, or because I'm on my phone, I can't see if your hand is raised. So honestly, just pop on.
I'm also just saying, you will see a block of text in the chat. That just has some of the study information. Like there's a few more things, but those are two good starting sources for folks that are interested about men's ability to read things as being either flirty or not flirty, or positive or not positive.
Thank you. Y'all were fantastic. The level of engagement was amazing. I don't know. Is everybody here getting or gonna get an email of the recording?
So I think we're planning on posting it so that we'll be able to host it on one of our social channels, most likely YouTube, for the long format of this. The chat will not be posted, so those will be kept separate, but the recording of this will be. And just again, thank you, Speak About It team. Abby, Jimmy, you're amazing. Aronde, little Wizard of Oz there behind the scenes. I love your voice popping in and out. It's great. We are going to be doing more of these. And Aronde, please help me out with this. We wanted to kind of get a poll and maybe just drop your answers in the chat, but we wanted to know, what the next kind of session like this could be and what kind of content you were looking for out of it. This flirting one, especially right before Valentine's Day, was great. But Aranda, if you want to speak on kind of the other topics that we could cover and then allow them to vote, that would be wonderful.
Sure. Yeah, I'm trying to remember what we talked about. So right now we have another one that's on power. And so it's very similar in format to this, but we're looking a little bit at how power dynamics might play out in not necessarily as much flirting, but in like a relationship. So what happens once you're already established with a person and, oh, thank you, I'm seeing kind things in the chat. What happens when you're already established with the person and how do you keep those power dynamics to like somewhere that's healthy and just like in a place where everyone kind of feels good. That one ends, I think, in a really fun place of looking at what we call the power tools. So trying to see how do we try to keep power more healthy in our relationships. We are working on an active bystander one that also is going to kind of cover a little bit about how do we step in and how do we keep our community safer by stepping in. And then that also is going to kind of cover a little bit of cancel culture. I was hesitant to say it, but it's not going to be fully on cancel culture, just going to like brush it gently. So there's that one. And then also theoretically we could like write one, right? If there's like some content that y'all are really excited about, we could write one that's kind of custom for what folks would be interested in. So those are the big things.
And I think as I'm remembering our conversation now, I do think the power one was one that we thought would really resonate, both in understanding our personal power, the power other people can have over us, and kind of the boundaries around those two things. Does that sound right, Aranda?
100% yes.
Awesome. So keep an eye out for that. That will be happening in March. And again, either donate directly to Speak About It through their website. It's wespeakaboutit.org. You can also shop Only Human, 10% of net profits from the company through January, February, and March of this year. Go back to Speak About It and their work in sexual education. And just again, thank you all. This was amazing. Thank you to everyone who participated in the chat. So many good tips and tricks. And I absolutely just love the Speak About It team. We're so honored to be partnered with you all.
Oh, thank you so much. It's such a delight. And again, everyone was amazing. So thank you for having us. Ooh, self-respect. Yeah. Interesting. Self-respect.
That's a good one.
That's great.
Ooh, that's really good.
Yeah, and I do think with our audience being mental health focused, the self-respect and the way that we can beat ourselves up sometimes would really resonate. So even if we just, maybe you all think about doing like even a blog post on that. And then yes, boundaries, of course, that's a huge one. Also for me, something I would love to be a fly on the wall for, so.
Yes.
I just have to say, working as a consent educator, all of my coworkers are the best at boundaries and consent. And so us hanging out together is like exactly how you would imagine 10 consent educators hanging out. And it's also how I want all of my relationships from now on. It's so much fun, constant checking in. It's great. It's great.
Amazing.
So yes.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And thank you for those suggestions. I just like jotted all that down. And so I'm really excited because like I think that boundaries thing and a self-respect one could actually really like flow really nicely together. And so interesting. So it'll either be power or boundaries, one of the two. Yeah, that's awesome.
Also, if anybody wants to stick around to ask, like, what was that? If anybody wants to stick around to like ask questions or something, I remember somebody asked about ways to get involved. Feel free to stick around. Nobody's trapped here, but feel free to like pop in, or you can speak to whatever questions you have as well.
But I think if you don't have questions, thank you so much for being here.
Yes.
You know where to find us. Thank you. Thank you. Have a great rest of your Friday and a great weekend.
Bye all. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
It's like so nice to have a face again, to not just be a PowerPoint.
Not to be Oz. Thank you so much. Okay.
This will get in touch with you all.
This is the second question we got about this. Yeah. So we have some folks who are educators who are curious about maybe bringing Speak About It or programming that's available for high schools. Oh, awesome. Yeah. And so the easiest thing to do would be to reach out on whatever kind of media platform is best for you. And so if that's email, info@wespeakaboutit.org is great. I can put that in the chat. Or actually, you can even just email me, two of you. Oh, perfect. You already did it. Thank you, Abby. You're so good.
You can also on the website has like a little bit of some mentioning of like different things that we do, and there's a form on the website that will directly come to us as well. So if that's easiest for you, you can do that. And then lastly, reaching out on social media too. Like we check the Instagram all the time. I am glued to Instagram, and so we will definitely see it if that goes there. So whatever is easiest for you, one of those 3 routes works.
Rondé,
Of course.
I got a question. Ooh, I'm sorry.
No, I was gonna say, and also feel free when you, if and when you reach out, feel free to like let us know like really specifically to like what you're interested in, because if we don't have a program currently that does that, I really do like when I get to like write a new program and try to design it for the needs of the population we're going into. So feel free to dream big and we can work on that together.
Question in the same vein. I got a question in the DMs a little bit earlier about if you have any ideas about how to spread awareness on the West Coast.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more about it. So in terms of like us, like we've gone to the West Coast before, and so like we could theoretically go out and do more of this stuff. Or do they mean just like generally?
Didn't say.
Okay.
So if the person is still here and wants to message me, context, or even speak to it themselves, feel free to do so.
In partner dance community, but I'm finding a lot of resistance. I'm sure you're also busy in dance culture. Oh, I love that. So Mary, yeah, that's
Can I just talk for a second?
Yeah, please do, of course.
Okay, cool. Like I know you all must be so busy, and most of what I'm trying to work on is not directly sexual, which I think is part of the problem. Like I will post in a group, what are you all doing about consent culture? And I will get private messages, mostly from women, saying, this is so important. We really need this. I'm tired of people thinking that they can just move me around the dance floor without even using their words or do other things to really control my body. I will get public posts, mostly from men, saying, I'm having a hard time getting behind this idea because, you know, if you show up to a dance, you're expecting to get touched. That's the whole point of dancing. And I know I'm really heavily gendering that, but it's a strong pattern I'm seeing. And then when people launch a complaint about something, the whole community shuts it down. They don't want to talk about it. And I'm wondering if anybody within your organization would have time to talk with me, or if anybody just even has ideas for why some communities are so entrenched in not wanting to talk about it.
Yes.
And I can tell you from my own experience, I used to not want to talk about it myself because I thought we were all a really safe family and we didn't have to talk about it. And so nobody wants to, it's like if you bring it up, then all of a sudden things are dangerous, where if you don't talk about it, we're all fine. And unfortunately, it goes really wrong.
Yes, heard. Thank you for bringing all that up, because I think that as someone that's always really like loved dancing and like going out and doing those things, but it's like frequently unsexual, right? That I'm like, I'm just here to dance, you know? Is like that really resonates. And so we have a bunch, I would love to have that conversation with you. Please email and we can talk about that, because there's one program in particular called Partying Safer that's kind of based off of actually a very similar conversation that I was bringing these topics up at schools and being like, cool, what are y'all doing to like think about just like being safe in these ways? And got some pushback from some folks that were like, oh, those parties would be super boring if people were like trying to like be safe like that. And then I did what I like refer to as I threw a spite party. And I was like, cool, I'm gonna throw like a really safe, like aware party, and we're gonna see that like it's not gonna suck. And so like us and this nearby brewery, we like started throwing this series of like safer space dance parties, and like each one had a different theme that was like kind of consent-y. And so like one of them was summer camp themed, and it was called Wet Hot American Consent. And like everyone, yeah, and like we really like leaned to, like there's an 80s one that was like you can't touch this. And so yeah, like I love talking about like how do we make parties like safe but still fun. And so like that's something that we definitely would, and that's like one of our main programs that we do a lot. And so like that's totally not a huge departure for us. So I would love to collaborate on that.
Fantastic, thank you so much. I will look. I think it tells me I just saved the chat. Usually it tells me where I can, oh, there it is, show in folder. Okay. Yes, thank you so much for being willing to talk about it. I would understand if you were too busy, but I just think it's such an important, it's a gateway to so many things. And it's something that's such a joy in so many people's lives. And I know so many people who have just left dance communities because they didn't feel safe and they couldn't get people to talk about it and change anything. And when I bring it up in dance communities, they're like, even the ones that are, they act like they're enthusiastic about it. I've had them tell me, yeah, but we've been working on that for 2 years. And, it just takes time. And I'm like, why does it have to take years to recognize that you don't get to control my body? Why would that take years?
Yep, that's heard.
One
I'm
of
so
our
sorry for
favorite-
that experience. Oh, but thank you for sharing that. I'm sorry, Abby.
Yeah, I was just going to say one of our favorite questions when we're in facilitations and people seem to be really unwilling to talk is just asking, why is it hard to talk about this?
Mm-hmm.
So that too, please talk to Aronde, please get the fantastic programs, do everything that you need. But in the event that things aren't happening, just being it seems like it's hard. This is hard for us. Why is this hard? Will hopefully also unlock some things for the people that you're talking to.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all of this very, very much.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. I look forward to talking later.
Great. And I'm looking back through the chat. Aronde, your information is back there in the chat someplace, right? That's where to...
Info.
Not. So here, I'm going to put it in. And, but yeah, that general email, the info @ goes to our executive director. And then this is my direct one. And then Sarah, I think I saw you turn your camera on a bit ago and then turn it back off. Did you have a question for us?
Yeah, so I work in a small district, but I'm actually texting with our school counselor right now. So I work in the middle school, but we're next door to the high school. So I guess my question is, because we're actually talking about how awesome this would be with the way that you guys define consent, but just online stuff. And I mean, we deal with that at the middle school level and the high school level. And so I guess, and I was trying to peek on the website as I was sitting here. What types of programming do you offer for that high school level? Is it, small group? Is it the whole school? Our high school probably has about 500 students, anywhere between 400 and 500 students.
Yeah, and so we've done things in a lot of different scales. And so at this point, Speak About It's worked with 500,000 students. And so that is to say we are comfortable with big groups of students all at once. Jimmy and Abby were just recently on tour for us. And so they can definitely talk about huge groups at once. And so that, if you wanted to try to get everyone all at once, the show is probably your best bet. And because it's a 5-person performance. Actually, Jimmy or Abby, do one of you want to explain the show?
Yes, the high school that I was at literally earlier this week, it was so crowded. They were putting kids in the aisles to sit on steps and watch us. It was really fun. They were so into it. They were very happy we were there.
Was that
but
BVNN?
It was BVNN.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Yes. So it's a 5-person show. It's about an hour long. And the show covers a little bit more of a broad scale than what we talked about today. So the show does talk about consent. It defines some things with relation to sexual and gender identity. And we also, throughout the show, tell verbatim stories from students across the country. So you get to hear from a lot of different first-person experiences about sexuality, about relationship styles. We also showcase and talk about healthy relationships and unhealthy relationships. So we have little scenes in between where we will play ourselves and walk through essentially this is how you could ask for consent in a hookup situation, which the students by and large find hilarious because we do it behind a curtain because we're not making out with our coworkers, Sorry, spoiler alert, it's fake theater.
It's so funny because students are always wait, did you?
Yeah, they're what? It's no. And then the second half of the show kind of moves to talk a little bit more about sexual assault. So we do read firsthand accounts of sexual assault. We talk about ways to support a friend, ways to think about that in your community, and then move into also active bystander and kind of role play some sort of active bystander scenarios as well. I think that's most of it.
That's perfect.
Can I tack on? Can I tack on?
Yeah.
And afterwards, depending on the schools themselves, we either can lead facilitated discussions with the students after the show is over, or we can train the student leaders in the community to help lead these discussions and sit in on those, oversee them, and make sure that they stay on track.
Yeah.
And I know that it's not an official program, but my favorite is doing the Q&As. That's my favorite post show, is the post show Q&A. I love them so much.
Yeah.
Tell Olivia that, because I really like them and Olivia doesn't like them, and so we always have that's a whole separate thing.
Okay.
But yeah, and so like that's what I would say if you wanted to try to get like everyone all at once. But my recommendation is always to kind of like do a little bit of age separation, just because like freshmen learn in a way that's so different than like seniors in high school, and then we're like not even like taking into account middle school, right? And so I would love to, like, I would say like middle school freshmen, we have a program called Healthy Relationships 101, and I think that would be the best fit for like that age group, because like it feels like it just like breaks things down a little bit more. And some of the like the show, like a lot of the show talks about like drinking and hooking up, which is relevant for some folks at that age, but oftentimes can feel like really overwhelming, and like, or just feel like so, you know, out of grasp for them that they like don't really resonate in the same way. And so yeah, so there's different ways that we can break it down. I'm sorry, what city and state are you in, or like town?
So it's weird to describe. I'm between Buffalo and Rochester, New York, so Western New York. So I teach in a small district that is conservative and small towny, and you know, like it's a big step for us that our new assistant superintendent for curriculum instruction has her pronouns in her email signature. So it's kind of like it's a slow roll. I mean, I've been there for 5 years and I've seen it. But I used to be an RA in college, so like this is right up my alley. But like I'm gonna be honest, like some of this I'm like, I don't know how like our administration would respond to that coming in, even though it's needed, because then they get the backlash from parents. I think the biggest need for us would probably be with the consent, just so they understand, because I took notes during this. Like the whole thing with the cake, and I think putting that, like, I'm sitting here, I'm like, oh my God, that would make sense to my students, because you're putting it in their terms. Like when you just talk about consent, they're thinking yes or no, and it's a one and done. Whereas the cake, you know, when you're talking about they may not like that slice, or maybe they get full, I was like,
so what I wonder is, so I think a few things that popped into my mind, and we can also like have like an official meeting. This does not need to be like the meeting.
I'm just gonna be the relay person, but I like to come with like all the information, be like, hey, so I went to this awesome webinar on a Friday night, and I learned, and I think it would be great and beneficial that maybe we should look into this.
That's awesome. Well, so something that might be worth bringing up. So if parents are a concern, we do a parent program where we talk to parents about how to talk to their kids about sex. And we do talk a little bit about, we intentionally don't say everything about the show, because we're like, cool, this is a great opportunity to use the skills you learned tonight to talk to your children about the show and what they saw, right? So like, that might be a good one if like parents are a concern. I would also say that we have modules that we made for the pandemic, and those are maybe like between 10 and 13 minutes. And they're like, really, they're like just, you know, little bite-sized, like, not even deep dives, little bite-sized, like little highlights of certain topics. And so there's one about like, what is normal? There's one about like consent. There's one about technology. I think that might also be a good starting place to like have something where like everyone can maybe see, and then we come in like lead like a conversation, or what Abby was saying, like do like one of the Q&A type things that might be helpful as well. So.
And the parent program could actually be interesting. So we're a Title I school. And so a lot of times we're getting community schools funding, where we're looking to do, they've in the past have brought in a speaker to speak to like the staff during the day. And then, but they have to tie it in with the parent program. So in order to like get the funds to bring this speaker in, we have to find a way to like tie it to the community. And I mean, it definitely could be interesting. We have some like local organizations that do like some I guess educational pieces with our health teachers. But again, our health classes are in the middle school. They get it in 6th grade and 8th grade, essentially 10 weeks, because it's every other day for half the year. And you know, the New York State health curriculum, they're jamming a lot in. And so the amount of time to spend on consent and healthy relationships. And I mean, we have a lot of students identifying across both the gender and sexuality spectrums, and that's kind of causing some educational and teachable moments. And so I think part of it is because of some of the way our kids grew up, like they're not exposed, they don't know, or they have their own views. So I think it would be interesting too for some of our kids to hear about the different types of relationships. Like that's okay. And how to have a healthy relationship if it happens to be two women or two men or, you know, whatever. I think for me, I think that's important.
I think
for
so
them.
too.
Yeah. But like, I'm also like, I don't get paid the big bucks. It's above my pay grade. So
yeah, I think that so I think also please definitely get in touch, because I think that like that there feels like there's a cool potential collaboration. And I think that if you pass on, or actually even if you wanted to like really give them all the information, I would say maybe email that info at, and we can send you our kind of like the program offering menu. And like that might be easiest, just like send along, that way you don't have to relay the information, it'll just like already kind of be laid out for you. I also want to check in with the remaining folks. Did anyone else have a question for us before I like release Jimmy and Abby into the world? Nick and Catherine, do you have any thoughts for us? It's fine if you're just watching. Oh, thank you, Sarah. I appreciate you too. This is like also one of those programs. It's like the parent program is my absolute favorite program we do, because it's just a bunch of parents like, how do I not traumatize my child? And it's like so and this one's also really fun too, because it feels like there's just like folks, there's such a good energy in the room frequently, and y'all like are continuing that. So thank you.
That's for real.
I just watching, appreciate all. Oh, heard. Cool. Thank you. All right, cool. Well, in that case, I guess bye, folks. Thank you for spending your Friday night
Go
with
for
us.
it, Prosper.
That's so sweet of you.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
Thank
Thank you.
And here, let me see. How do I stop the recording?
Thank
Thank you, Nick.
Stop recording. Okay.